Well, hello, and welcome to another edition of Becoming a Gibborim. This is part 15, and you know what that means? We're going behind enemy lines. Have you ever been behind enemy lines? Have you ever been in enemy-occupied territory? Do you know anything about what it's like to be inside the house of your worst nightmare enemies? Do you know anything about that? But before I go there, we're going to be jumping also into some places in time and history where there's some controversy. Yep. There's some people who think some things happened that didn't happen, and other people who think things that didn't happen really did happen. I may have said the same thing twice, but it bears repeating. Basically, there's a lot of people that talk about some of these situations of some very important moments in time where other people went behind enemy lines and came out with an unbelievable treasure trove of awesomeness. Okay, so if you're ready, guess what? We're diving in because I got all fired up today. It's true. Sometimes I've been known to do that. And you know what gets my umption in my gumption? Raw goat's milk. Yep, I discovered that basically is like electricity to my body. And I'm all hopped up on it. And I have enthusiasm and just as much oodles because I'm laboring with my hands. And that's so good. If you haven't labored with your hands in a while, there's something deep inside you, especially men, true story here. There's something deeply inside us that I think is actually biblically founded in the fact that we got cursed. Yeah, you were born cursed. I don't think people tell you that when you start out early on in life very often, but you've been cursed from the day you were born. Every person, every human who wakes up in the moment of life, guess what? You opened up a day of cursing right out of the blocks. And that's really important. If you don't know that, you should probably know that right now because it's in the beginning. So this is my sword of awesome currently that I'm using. This is going all the way back to Genesis. In the beginning, remember, was the Word, and the Word was with... Oh, wait, that's the other beginning. The other beginning is in the beginning. Yahweh created the heavens and the earth, right? This is all the way back in the garden beginnings. And it's super important to understand because there was a time when nobody was cursed. There's a time when everybody woke up with perfect, absolute joy, contentment, vibrancy, vitality, and yet they also worked. They worked. Men worked, women worked, they co-labored together because Adam, I actually think, saw and met with every single animal. Think about that for a second. Think about what it'd be like if you personally met every creature. I think about that all the time because I want to personally meet every creature. I actually have a desire to meet all of those unmentionable, weird, scary, almost mortifyingly, intensely bad-looking animals. I want to be around them. I like to look them in the eye. I think it's very important. Sometimes they wound my face because I look them in the eye. But I digress. There is an amazing thing that happens, I think, when a person, human, gets to look an animal in the eye and not have fear mutually. When mutually you don't both have fear of each other, but you have a respect for each other. But Adam, I think he actually got to hang out with the animals in such a unique way that they were potentially co-laboring with him then. I'm around goats a lot right now, and I'm seeing how much work a goat can get done. It's prodigious. It's an unbelievable amount of work I could never do. They eat thorny things with their mouth voluntarily all the time. If you're a farmer, I've never farmed with animals, you see. This is this whole new world that's opening up to me. Not the animals I wanted. I farmed with rats that ate my crops, and then I spiked them with a very vicious little snare that I made for them. It works for boats, like tiny boats. I think of soldiers' toes inside a steel-toed boot and then crunching down on them with very vicious little snares. I got trained in a way of making snares that was different. But then my friend from Texas taught me about Texas-sized rat traps, and that thing messed some rats up in my life. Oh my gosh. That were my big problems down on the farms. But I've never had animals that were like a helper, like an actual helpmate with me on the farm. Goats are. They're an incredible help. I only know goats because of their wonderful leathery skin and their gloves. They're great for gardening. I highly recommend them. But they are awesome. They're eating the way through brambles right now, and those are the worst thing ever. And every time I look at forests, any kind of serious thick forest, east of the Mississippi, You guys have these vines that climb trees and pull trees to the ground. They're so strong. That's unreal. In Colorado, we didn't have anything like that. I don't think I ever saw a vine do anything really I wanted it to do. I had a goji plant once that was just terrifically happy, but I never really did well with viney things. And now I've seen the power of vines out here, out east. It's outrageous what they do. They pull entire trees and canopies back down onto the ground where they eat them and take their sunlight back. They're vicious. But I've seen goats be more vicious. And they go through these patches of forest that are so horrifically thick, they eat their way through them. It's incredible. I love seeing that. I think Adam in the garden originally had animals doing all the kinds of work he needed to get done, and they worked mutually for each other's benefit. I think they did communicate. I think it was incredible. I want to know what that's like. And so I'm always on a quest to try to figure out what that'd be like. So I try to look animals directly in the eye. Look at Nature Nate series. If you haven't, I wanted to really look at like an American alligator in the eye and swim up to its face. This is most people's worst nightmare. For me, I just was genuinely, innately curious about what they looked like in there. And they look like a creature from some kind of dinosaur time. There's no way around it. It looks like a dinosaur. It's like got a skin suit on of armor, perfect for the environment it was born in. It's incredible. There's so much uniqueness that makes me marvel at the Creator when I look at his creation, especially animals. And so I've got this just deep desire in myself to always see them, to look them in the eye. And now I'm learning to co-labor with them. And I'm seeing that if I feed this thing thorns and thistles, good, juicy, green-leafed ones, they will feed me with milk. And someday, maybe meat or gloves. I'm just really amazed at them. I'm absolutely enamored with him. And I'm suddenly having a strong desire that I could talk to the goats. Because if I could tell them not to eat the fruit trees in some other way than, don't eat the fruit trees, I think I could have a fantastic thing going. But I can't do that yet. And that's because we're cursed, son. Yes, you are cursed. We've all been cursed from the beginning. But I think the sweat of our brow is one of the most powerfully effective tools that we have to labor. Actually, labor hard is one of the most incredible gifts we've ever been given. Okay, you ready for this? All right, let's go back to the dragon in the beginning, dragon time, okay? Because there was a dragon in the garden. A fiery serpent is what he was actually called. A nachash is how you would say his word, okay? There's a lot of nachashes in the scriptures, not just here. And some of them are used as judgment. Other times, they're definitely there to ensnare you. And so it's good to study the enemy's tactics, because if you're going to go behind enemy lines, you better know what their MOS is. What's their military occupational specialty? What is their job? What do they do? I've been studying the tactics of the dragon for a long time because I actually believe that he gets defeated once and for all. Like, there's only one who's going to be able to defeat the dragon. And he's going to definitely do that with certainty. But how do we ourselves here on the earth contend against the snares of the dragon? How do we avoid those unbelievably well-designed lures and crafty little hook, line, and sinker kind of opportunities waiting to swallow down the worst idea in your life and destroy yourself and everybody you've ever loved? How do we get past that stuff? And not only get past that stuff, how do we actually go into the enemy's camp and plunder his house? How do you get there in your life? How do you get there in your walk? I think that's literally how you become a Gibborim. Do you see? That's what this part 15, there's 15 parts in this because I'm barely even starting to scratch the surface of what it takes to become a Gibborim. I really mean that. And I think every bit of this is everything you've ever needed to know about to become mighty, how to be valiant, how to be one of the people that the master, when he told us, I'm going to give you the keys of the kingdom, and what you bind on this earth will be bound in heaven. What you loose on this earth will be loosed in heaven. He literally gave us the keys to the kingdom and gave us the authority to bind things on this earth and they'd be bound in heaven, so that we could go and literally take the gates of death, the gates of Hades. Like, he said this and proclaimed that a kingdom authority. He proclaimed that to us at the temple of Pan. If you don't know who Pan is, he's a goat god hybrid called a satyr. Okay? They're biblical. If you didn't know that, hybrids are biblical. They're Genesis 6 biblical. But there's satyrs in the scripture. There's dragons in the scripture. There's unicorns in the scripture. There's all kinds of stuff in the scriptures that people don't talk about. Ketos, that's what ate Jonah. Okay? Not just a whale or a fish or some kind of leathery backed creature. There's an unbelievable amount of things that are going on in the scriptures, and you need to learn these things. You need to be able to be armed so that you can engage them should they come across your path. But Pan was the god who had a temple literally right there where the Messiah was speaking when he told them that they would take the gates of hell, the gates of Hades, that the church that he was building, the called out assembly that he was gathering up, it didn't just start in the New Testament. It started when he gave the instructions the first time. The called out assembly of Israelites, of people that crossed out of Egypt and into the kingdom that he was calling them to. The called out ones gathered themselves together, and he gave them a set of instructions there. And then he gave us more instructions all throughout the scriptures through testimonies so that we could be equipped to actually go with the power and the authority that he's given us to take the very gates. How do you take the gates? How do you invade the kingdom of darkness? How do you preach the gospel to every creature? How do you tell every creature about the power of deliverance that is available to those who place their faith and their trust in the Redeemer? How do you do that? That's the biggest question, and that should be something that preoccupies your mind on a regular basis. And for me, I get that from laboring. I don't get that from laboring in the systems of that same beast that I was ensnared by. Do you get what I mean? For me, I actually think the sweat of my brow heals me, and I believe it would heal you too. And there's a lot of people that are for the first time ever actually contemplating, what if I left the systems of man entirely? What if I actually really thought about the fact that I may not be able to go to the store ever again to buy food because my convictions, my faith of what I believe to be true is no longer permitted. It's no longer permitted. It's not allowed. It's not only not allowed, it's actually being persecuted. Now you're going to watch this happen to us in our lifetime, with our families, with our friends, with our best friends. You are watching the nations turn their eyes against the people who have convictions that are against theirs in a much more physically tangible way every day. And you better be ready to address that. And so a lot of people are wisely considering, I should probably actually find a way to grow my own food, because I may never be able to buy, sell, or trade again. I may never have the means to go to a store and buy the things that I once was able to do. That's a serious pressing concern for a lot of people. And so people are looking at gardening. People are looking at animal husbandry. People are looking at all these areas that were not quite so popular because they require a ton of labor. There's a reason people invented things like easier ways of doing anything, because we tend to pronate towards slothfulness and comfort. But he didn't send us to be soldiers or commission us to be comfortable. That's the cult of other doctrines. That's not the cult of this scripture. He called people to be courageous. Do you understand the difference between a comfortable man and a courageous man? You seen a courageous woman before in your life versus a comfortable woman? They're very different, and there's a reason. There's a snare of the enemy that's always calling us to comfort. But there's the cord that sets us free is severed by the sword of the Spirit, and that comes from reading his word, knowing it, putting it in you, allowing it to transform you and make you out of who you are and turn you into who he is. This is how you do that. You ready? Genesis 3, okay? We're going to back it up just a little bit, because this is also, if you didn't know it, one of the most powerful prophecies in the entirety of Scripture. And he said, let's jump up to... Then Yahweh said to the woman, "What is this that you have done?" And the woman said, "The serpent deceived me, and I ate." And Yahweh Elohim said to the serpent, "Because you have done this, cursed are you more than all cattle, and more than every beast of the field. On your belly you will go, and dust you will eat all the days of your life. And I will put enmity between you and the woman, and between your seed and her seed. He shall bruise you on the head, and you shall crush him with your heel." To the woman he said, "I will greatly multiply your pain in childbirth. In pain you will bring forth children. So yet your desire will be for your husband, and he will rule over you." And then to Adam he said, "Because you have listened to the voice of your wife, and have eaten from the tree of which I commanded you, saying, you shall not eat from it, cursed is the ground because of you. In toil you will eat of it all the days of your life. Both thorns and thistles it shall grow for you, and you will eat the plants of the field by the sweat of your face, and you will Eat bread till you return to the ground, because from it you were taken, for dust you are, and to dust you shall return. Now the man called his wife's name Eve, because she was the mother of all living. And Yahweh Elohim made garments of skin for Adam and his wife and clothed them. Okay, if you didn't catch that, he says to the man, cursed is the ground because of you. So if the ground got cursed because of man, can the ground, by the sweat of our brow and the work of our toil, to fight back against that same system, can it instead, the ground, be able to be blessed by us? I actually think our sweat falling off of our brow and landing on the earth, our tears coming out of our eyes and landing on the earth, are the things that begin to heal and undo aspects of the curse in us and in it, because we are taken from it. We are made of it. The earth and us are so interconnected. The animals and us are so interconnected in such a unique way. And it was supposed to be much more intimate than it was. But because of this, by the sweat of our face, we will eat bread until we return to the ground. By thorns and thistles it shall grow for you. The thorns and the thistles are for us, and yet I have animals out there that help me in my burden bearing by eating the things that are part of my consequence of the curse because of my mistake. But if I lead them to those pastures, if I help them find the good food, they will work for me and work with me and work alongside me if I labor to do that. But it requires me getting up with discipline every single day. Goats require constant labor. They do. They're another one of these little bit higher maintenance animals out there, unless maybe you have in massive pasture lands out there that have been well grazed, properly managed for decades. That's awesome. If you have that, I would love to have that. So consider that. That would be amazing. I've never experienced that yet, but I am beginning to experience what it's like to go labor with them and alongside them and for us to help each other. And it is such a beautiful thing. With vegetable gardening, I did a lot of vine dressing. There wasn't anything co-laboring in there with me except for somebody else occasionally stepping in. There was no animal that could help me with tomato pruning. There wasn't. They would have just eaten it all. But there's animals now that I'm starting to learn are helping me deal with the curse that I've been dealt in my life. Because I look at my soul sometimes and I think of it like the forest that's overgrown with all the thorns and the thistles and vines, strangler vines, climbing up over the trees and trying to rip them to the ground. And I think it's true for your soul too. I think our souls have been fully ensnared in so many ways by the kingdom of men being under the influence of the kingdom of darkness to suck up the good fruit that we were supposed to bear, to choke it out, to extinguish it, to rend it to pieces and tear it down so that more thorns and thistles can grow in its place, for the curse to grow stronger. That is what the enemy's entire agenda, goal, focus, absolute dedication, and precisionally, tactically engineered plans are for. They are to ensnare and destroy and choke out the good fruit. Because if you leave these systems, if you leave these forests be, inevitably we see attributes of that. If you leave grass unmanaged, weeds will inevitably find a way to choke it out and grow in its place. This is just the way the curse is. But if people come alongside it and manage it, like with a scythe, amazing what can happen with a scythe. If it's properly managed, you can instead cultivate life. And so the curse is pushed back. That's what we're here for. But if you take man out of the picture, it returns. The curse is evident around us. And there's men and women who have plotted and schemed under the kingdom of darkness's direction to advance the speed, advance the rapidity of the actual influence of that curse on our lives and in the lives of the people around them. Those are agents of evil, okay? People make a big deal in the truther community and in these different now more virally burgeoning ideas of truther communities that are taking place out there, of focusing on and studying the tactics of agents of evil. And that's not wrong. That's not bad. I spent a lot of time doing that before as well. I spent years of my life trying to study how the mechanics of the agents of evil operated. But what I've begun to learn since I shifted my focus from the agents of evil, from individuals, and I started looking at systems, I began to see that not only in studying of systems, that's where there's an entire system that is built up. Like when you study the pharmaceutical industry and you study their origins, you study their foundations, all the way back to where we get the words for that from, all the way back to where the first practitioners of that came from. Like if you study the roots of the plant, you can understand why its fruit looks a certain way. And once you identify a plant's fruits, you can see what its seeds and its little young seedlings and saplings look like. You can learn to identify them easily. And once you can do that, you can discern between good and evil, right? Solomon, in his wisdom, when he was seeking to become a mighty man, when he wanted to be wise, he sought for an understanding heart. He looked for discernment so he could discern between good and evil, so he could judge righteously, so that he could govern the people that he'd been entrusted with. That was a mighty, powerful prayer. He wanted to be able to tell the difference between fruit. That's a fruit inspector's primary job. Good fruit, bad fruit. When I was selling at a farmer's market for the farmer, I had to finally see what it was like to, hey, do I have confidence when I go to sell this person this orange, that it's a good orange? If the fruit picker and the fruit inspector, the papaya was an easier way to tell. Whoever was picking the papaya had a big responsibility to pick the ripe, but not too ripe, the just right ripeness for us to hand it to the market and get it to the market and get it into the customer's hands at the right time. We wanted it in this window of 2 to 5 days of perfect ripeness. So my wife picked tomatoes every single day. Every single day she waited to see that tomato is exactly at the ripeness for us to be able to pick it, wash it, set it in a carton with a nice little other set of beautiful, fresh, organic tomatoes, and then get that carton to the market, to the customer, and it be perfectly ripe for that process. That is an enormous amount of undertaking. It required constant labor. It was a dedication for us to do that. But because of that, we had confidence when we handed our fruit to people that it was exactly the ripeness it needed to be. People had knowing we would do the right job at inspecting our fruit and making sure good quality fruit was given to the people. That built trust and confidence for our farmer that customers continued to come back to see and have and experience more on a regular basis. It was a powerful way of living. It was a spectacular way to see a reputation develop for somebody. And it began to teach me all these lessons that were in this scripture and in this book that I never understood about why it's so important to be able to discern between good and evil. And so as I looked into studying the systems of these evil things that are happening, systems of agents of evil, right? This would be like the WHO. This is those big alpha systems that are known, the UN, studying what are global tactics? What is globalization? Go read Carl Tykereb's book, The Reenchantment of Man. If you want some meaty, valuable, incredibly well-researched, outrageously even better lived stories and testimonies of what the systems of man are being used and engineered to design a spiritual system that interlocks with it, okay? There's a lot that's happening between those systems. They're trying to bring unity between spiritual systems and carnal systems. And the way they're doing that is an ensnaring of technocratic, in a lot of ways, technological and spiritual blendings of mythology, gods, goddesses. The old ways, the old religions are all being intermingled into a technological, globalized mission and focus. That's systems of man, right? I studied that for a long time too. I wrote chapters and chapters in my book about these kinds of things. But I stopped doing a lot of that and I just started really focusing on studying what does the scripture say about how our agents, the actual dragon, how does he operate? I needed to know that. So I began to just study purely from the scriptures, every verse and tactic about it, because I recognized if I could study and I diagnose his fruit, I would be far more effective at diagnosing the same good or bad fruit along the way. I'm going to have to take a pause here. The children are up. Or do we just go with it? Well, guess what? I think we're just going to go with it. My child is awake. She's liable to make some noises. They're good for you, sweet. You know what? We're just going to go with it. Because guess what? I'm in the thick of it. She's going to be a warrior someday, right? Are you training your children up to be warriors? That's what mine sounds like right now. I don't know if you can hear it. But needless to say, I'm going to persevere. And I hope you do too. Now, when we're trying to diagnose and understand what the systems of evil really look like, if you don't know from the groundwork up all of the foundational starting points, there's a seed war. That's preeminent. That's super big fundamentals. You need to know this kind of information. There's a seed war that's been going on from right here, that the seed of the woman and the seed of the serpent, the seed of the dragon, are at a constant battle. And because of that, they understand there's one thing they're trying to get, and that's the souls of men. Okay, we talked about this before. You remember this? They want the spirits and the souls of men. Both of them, in a good way, because one wants to cultivate life, but the other one wants to cultivate death, actually. Do you remember? This dragon is the first one to ensnare man to transgress, but also he was the first one to ensnare man with death, like sin unto death. Cain, remember Cain? Sin, it said sin was crouching at the door. Cain was warned that sin was crouching at the door, and its desire was to consume him. Its desire was to seize him. Its desire was to own him, rule him, have dominion over him. Like the Father tried to intercede for him there, tried to give him a warning. But the thing crouching at the door, it's like a lion stalking you in the darkness. It's the enemy that is right there, just outside of your reach, waiting to consume and destroy you. But it's also an ambush predator. It's waiting for an opportune time, because he's not going to strike unless he's confident that he can deal a deadly blow. That's how snakes hunt. They're ambush predators. The serpent hunts the same way. The dragon hunts people the same way, and he waits patiently, biding his time. But as the days get more evil, his time gets shorter. Do you remember? Revelation 12. He comes down with a great wrath because the dragon knows his time is short, meaning he's no longer just the ambush predator, meaning he is going to launch everything he's got to destroy those who love the Father, keep his commandments, and follow after him with everything in them. The people that are set apart, those strange, peculiar people, he is going to go after them with wrath like never before. So you have to be ready to stand against it, to be the standard against it, to be raised up for such a time as this, to be the impenetrable wall that is laid up in front of those that are innocent, in front of those who do not know better, in front of the ignorant, okay? And I believe that you do that by reading your way through this scripture, okay? I'm going to jump in to David's story, because if I don't, this is going to turn into a 3-hour video. I'm fired up, like I said. Are you? Do you ever feel that way? Do you ever feel that way some days? You know, when you're... My daughter gets that way. She's pumped up today. All right. We're jumping in to 1 Samuel. Now, where we left David last time in this story about mighty Gibborims, if you didn't know it, we're reading about David in this portion, okay? Chapter 26, short recap. David, Saul, obviously, king of Israel, soon to be king of Israel, are in a kind of battle, but not really. Saul is just finding ways to try to murder David. He's not succeeding very well over and over again, because Yahweh is not going to let that happen. David is actually set apart to be the king of Israel. Saul, on the other hand, is set apart towards self-destruction. That's it about this point. He is devoted wholly to murdering David every single day of his life. David finds Saul and his men sleeping because the slumber of the living Elohim came upon them, smoked them. By that I mean made them all go to sleep and just not wake up anymore. They woke up in the morning, but not right then. They woke up when David screamed at them, "I stole your stuff." That was awesome. David led with that story. Saul agrees it was a bad idea and that David is fine. However, check this out. David snuck into camp, stole a spear from Saul's face, which is fantastic, got out of camp, taunted Saul about it, gave him mercy. That was powerful. But the next day, David, I don't know if it's actually the next day. Let's jump in and find out. So Saul went, this is the end of chapter 26. Then Saul said to David, "Blessed are you, my son David. You will both accomplish much and surely prevail." So David went on his way, and Saul returned to his place. Then David said to himself, "Now I will perish one day by the hand of Saul. There is nothing better for me than to escape into the land of the Philistines. Saul then will despair of searching for me any more in all the territory of Israel, and I will escape from his hand." So David arose and crossed over, he and his 600 men that were with him, to Achish, the son of Maoch, king of Gath. And David lived with Achish at Gath, he and his men, each with his household, even David with his 2 wives, Ahinoam the Jezreelitess and Abigail the Carmelitess, Nabal's widow. Now it was told to Saul that David had fled to Gath, so he no longer searched for him. Sweet meatiness. There's a lot going on there. Are you ready for this? This is why I keep trying to remind you guys from right here. David had families with him in the wilderness. Mighty men, a lot of times, have families with them. They're not generally solo. Occasionally they are. Mighty women, often not solo. There's a power in numbers. There's a power in community. And if you've been entrusted with a family of your own, that's super fundamentally important that you recognize you're not just to storm the gates solo. Most of you need to learn how to advance the kingdom from, first of all, violently taking that other kingdom that's taken root in your soul, destroying that with violence out of your soul, and finding deliverance for your family, and then seeking the kingdom out there as well. Okay? Super and critical. David and all his mighty men are now running from Saul into the enemy's camp. Not even a little bit. We're talking all the way stinking down in the enemy's camp. David plants himself in Gath. Is Gath familiar for you? If you didn't listen to my video on headshots, go check that out. I talk about how this is basically a super weapon. Really. I always carry a few of these with me. I mean that. I used to call them David stones. I don't know what else to call them. I've always carried a good, roundish shaped, fantastically smoothish, wonderful hand-feeling kind of rock with me, because I never know when I'm being called to slay a giant, and neither do you. But for me, these are testimony stones, because did you remember our Messiah one time said this thing about how if you don't praise me, the stones will cry out? Like, I think because men have been silent for so long about their master, the stones are crying out. I think the earth itself that's been cursed, men have been so absent from their labor for so long that the earth itself is groaning. The earth itself is actually crying out. And yet there's testimonies waiting in the sweat of the brow kind of fields out there. There's all these vineyards that are waiting to be worked that will give you stones of testimony. David knew a thing or two about stones when he stepped up to that river, and he gathered 5 of them. It says very clearly that he picked up 5 stones. Why did David, who's going to fight one giant, need 5 stones? Because he definitely showed us his tactic there was go for the head. Option number 2, it tells us, I believe in Amos, is how they attacked the giants and how they fought with them. Their fruit above and their feet beneath, their roots beneath. Okay, these were tactics of how they actually attacked the enemy. How do you kill somebody that's 12 feet tall and maybe 5 feet wide, dressed in an armored suit? How do you kill a walking tank? How do you kill a tank? Have you ever thought about it? I have. I studied it a lot. I studied even how they kill our own tanks. It's hard to find images of Abrams that have been destroyed. There's a lot of classified technology that's still caught up in tank armor, and so with reason, they've sealed up a lot of that stuff. But we have a lot of things like explosive reactionary armor, meaning our armor explodes in your face when you hit it. I don't think you have to hit it with a sledgehammer kind of hard. I think you have to hit it a lot harder than that. But I've never personally tried it. I think about it, what that would be like. Let me know. Maybe you have. Maybe you know a little more about explosive armor. But basically, when an incoming round comes in, as it begins to enter into the armor itself explodes in the round's face. And it basically just completely creates a wave of protective energy as it's going out. It's incredible stuff, but it can be self-destructive, right? Because it's going off right next to you. So you don't want to be a foot soldier around a tank when it gets shot. Does that make sense? You don't want to be standing in front of that bad boy. It's pretty impressive. David chose 5 of these to go after the tank. That's pretty amazing. David used 1 for Goliath. Then he picked up Goliath's sword, cut his head off with it, took his head to a hill in Jerusalem, I think Golgotha, and put it in there because that seed war was still raging. Jesus, right? Yeshua, the Messiah, he was the seed of the woman that was prophesied there. He definitely got struck by the serpent, right? He got literally, physically killed by the serpent, and he did so on the hill of the skull. The seed of the serpent, that would be Goliath, where the stone slinging happened. He was a hybrid, basically a superhuman. By that, I mean he was a progeny, child of a giant or child probably of a giant before him, because it literally says they were children of giants. But he came from the lineage of the Nephilim. Okay, he was a son of the dragon. He was a son of the embodiment of the dragon. He was biologically different, physically different, spiritually probably very different kind of mental and spiritual capabilities with those ones. And because of that, they were marked for destruction in a different kind of way. I think it's also because they chose to give in to the iniquity. They made a decision to flow into that kingdom. There's some also kind of hybrids that didn't make those same choices. You can look up some of the other Gibborim even that David did. I did a show with David Carrico and John Pounders on Now You See TV a couple years ago called The Gibborim. And you can just go look that up in my playlist channel. I'll tag it in here somewhere, hopefully. And either way, we talked a lot more about this at the time, that there's other Gibborim. You can go look into that all your own. That being said, David picked up 5 stones. David had every intention to slay the other 4 brothers of Goliath. Because guess what? Goliath had broskies. And those broskies were bad news bears. They chose terrible decisions most of their life. And they chose to walk in iniquity. And David probably saw them there at Gath. When he was fighting Goliath of Gath. He probably saw the 4 other brothers who were in the army waiting to also fight. But Goliath was the best of all of them. But Goliath's brothers, they probably didn't like that very much when David murdered their brother right in front of them. But I think at the end of the day, what I'm noticing here, David's Gibborim mightiness was so renowned that even his enemies did not have fault with him in the same way. Because he goes on the run here now quite a few years later, and he is able to run to the very town where Goliath was from. You think David didn't have some notoriety at this point in his life? We know he does. Remember, all these people are singing songs about Saul's killed his thousands and David his 10,000s. A lot of those were Philistines, remember? How in the world is David and all of his family's wives and children, livestock, everything they own, how is it able to go into Gath and live there? Did you think about that? What if the Father literally called you not to go to the mountains and the woods, in the forest to your bug out location and live out your days in the end of days in a nice, safe retreat location? What if he called you into the heart of darkness? Not a little bit. Like, what if he actually said, hey, I want you to actually move down into the place where the dragon's nest is. There's nests of the dragon. Yeah, real nests. There's places where dragons still live. And they, I think, maybe need the gospel. I don't know. We'll find out. Every creature, right? Mark tells us, the Master tells us in Mark, account, to preach the gospel to every creature. So are you willing to preach the gospel to every creature? I am. I'll preach the gospel to dragons, I guess. We'll see how that goes. I don't know. We'll figure it out as we go, right? But we're supposed to preach the gospel to every creature. And I think we do that by contending with them. David and his family, they're right there in the heart of darkness. Some of us are going to be called to the heart of darkness. Some of us are going to be, in order to survive, in order to escape our pursuers, our captors, we're going to be sent into the worst place on the earth that we would normally never go to. But David, in the same way as he does it, is blessed because of it. Only the Father can turn going and moving into your enemy's camp into, oh yeah, and that was the right thing to do at the time, kind of a scenario. David did that. Here, let's read on, shall we? Oh yeah, I'm diving in here. All right. Then David said to Achish, if now I have found favor in your sight, let them give me a place in one of the cities in the country, that I may live there. For why should your servant live in the royal city with you? So Achish gave him Ziklag that day. Therefore Ziklag has belonged to the kings of Judah to this day. The number of days that David lived in the country of the Philistines was 1 year and 4 months. Now David and his men went up and raided the Gershites and the Girzites and the Amalekites, for they were the inhabitants of the land from ancient times, as you come to Shur, even as far as the land, and did not leave, as you come even as far as the land of Egypt. Now David attacked the land, and did not leave a man or woman alive, and he took away the sheep, the cattle, the donkeys, the camels, and the clothing. Then he returned and came to Achish. Now Achish said, where have you made a raid today? And David said, against the Negev of Judah, and against the Negev of the Jerahmeelites, and against the Negev of the Kenites. So David did not leave a man or woman alive to bring to Gath, saying otherwise. They will tell about us, saying, so has David done, and so has been his practice all the time he has lived in the country of the Philistines. So Achish believed David, saying, he has surely made himself odious, stinky, among his people Israel. Therefore he will become my servant forever. This is quite a strategy. David, not only is he living in the enemy's camp, David starts plundering the enemy's camp. First of all, you remember there's a scripture that says he stores up the wealth of the wicked for the righteous. Do you remember that scripture? He actually means that. The wicked are actually storing up the inheritance for the righteous. And at the Father's right timing, he transfers it. He just does that. He has the power to do that, to make that which was once intended for evil, for the great good and the saving of many lives. Remember Joseph's story, how powerful that was? The whole thing, the whole story, brutal, right? His mighty man story, absolutely soul-crushingly brutal at times. It's fantastic at the end when he, has the reunion with his family and all that stuff, but it was rough for a long time in there for Joseph. There is such a powerful transference that happens here for David. He not only goes into his enemy's house, the enemy even blesses him, gives him, because the Father can give you favor even with your enemies, so that, you know what? The work of your hands, the work that you are doing and that you are accomplishing is so good fruit. The fruit of your life is so good, they want you with them because they recognize by you being around, you bring blessings to them. Ziklag is a town that David gets as an inheritance from King Achish of Gath. Oh, maybe he's not king. Yeah, Achish. He's not the king, I guess. No, just a guy. I don't know who Achish is as much then. But either way, he's an important individual in Gath, where David had slain the giant from. It's pretty powerful. That being said, David and his men decide, hey, guess what? What's our best strategy? To start plundering the Philistines while we're living with the Philistines. Well, that kind of is difficult to understand. Tactically, that's generally not a good idea. But David has a recognition that that's what he's there for. At the end of the day, David is still there because he is going to be the king of those lands. And David discovers that the best way to plunder the enemy is to take all the enemy's camp. All of it. Let's read about how our master did the same thing and how he's calling you and me and everybody who wants to join up for the commander of the heavenly hosts and his awesome army and his campaign to take the land is going to be doing the same thing. We're going to be taking captivity captive because our master did. Check this out. If you haven't read Ephesians should be one of those books that you know incredibly well. It should be one of those books that is like sewn into the skin of your soul, kind of yeah. Ephesians is great. Even if you can't read it every single day, find a way to read a portion of it every single day. The Proverbs, also a foundationally good one to read every single day. Ephesians, way up there on the list of you should probably read that constantly. Absolutely. The Psalms, definitely. The Torah, for certain. These are foundational meatiness that you need on a regular basis. But I was diving into Ephesians today, and I came upon this. Therefore, I just want to read this whole chapter. Let's see. You know what? I'm just going to jump in a little bit more. Now, this is Ephesians 4:8. Therefore, it says, when he ascended on high, he led captive a host of captives, and he gave gifts to men. Now, this expression, he ascended, what does it mean except that he also descended into the lower parts of the earth? He who descended is himself also he who ascended above all the heavens so that he might fill all things. This is what I was talking about a little bit more with the divine counsel and understanding hierarchy and understanding how in Colossians, we were talking about he led captivity itself captive here, like it tells us, but he disarmed the principalities and the powers, and he made a show of them openly, triumphing over them in it. It was one of the most incredible little verses. He disarmed them, right? But it also says that he ascended on high and took captive, a host of captives. He raided the enemy's camp. Do you get that here? When he went down into the earth after he was basically getting stricken by the head of the serpent, Goliath's skull was nipping at the heels of Messiah on the cross. Do you recognize that? But don't worry, he crushed his head. Well, he did that when he went down into the earth, all the way down to where it says he descended into the lowest parts of the earth. That's a place called Tartarus. If you haven't read Jude or 2 Peter, it talks about how the fallen angels were bound in chains and held in Tartarus. It's like the ultimate prison cell. It's the deepest, worst place to throw the absolute bad guys in the story. You know what I mean? It's the absolute place where these things are in prison because their actions and their deeds were so evil and it was so infectious that they must be constrained, they must be restrained from allowing to influence everyone in the same way. Otherwise, the days of Noah happen, right? But here he's literally saying how he went down into the same place of the earth and he plundered their camp. He bound the enemy. He bound the enemy. He bound the prince of the earth, okay? He restrained his ability to influence over us the same things that he once used to hold us all captive. And he instead raided the coffers of his storehouses where the souls of men had been held captive up until that time. And then he actually came up and gave gifts to men. This is the triumph, right? This was the triumph. This was his first triumph. It was incredible. And he has another one that's coming that will be oh so much more mighty, okay? And he is calling each of us to partner with him in it. Now, and he said, and he gave some as apostles, and some as prophets, and some as evangelists, and some as pastors and teachers, for the equipping of the saints for the work of service, to the building up of the body of Messiah, until we all attain to the unity of faith and of the knowledge of the Son of God, to the stature, to a mature man, to the measure of the stature which belongs to the fullness of the Messiah. As a result, we are no longer to be children tossed here and there by waves, and carried about by every wind of doctrine, by the trickery of men. That's the agents of evil. Remember, I was telling you some of the things to study. The trickery of men would be agents of evil, the systems of deceit, right? And he said, by craftiness in deceitful scheming, but rather by speaking the truth in love. We are to grow up in all aspects into him who is the head, even the Messiah, from whom the whole body, being fitted and held together by what every joint supplies, according to the proper working of each individual part, causes the growth of the body for the building up of itself in love. So this I say and affirm together with Yahweh, that you walk no longer just as the Gentiles also walk in the futility of their mind, being darkened in their understanding, excluded from the life of Elohim because of the ignorance that is in them, because of the hardness of their heart. And they, having been callous, have given themselves over to sensuality for the practice of every kind of impurity with greediness. But you did not learn Christ in this way, if indeed you have heard him and have been taught in him, just as truth is in Jesus, that in reference to your former manner of life, you lay aside the old self, which is being corrupted in accordance with the lusts of deceit, and that you be renewed in the spirit of your mind, and you put on the new self, which is the likeness of Elohim, having been created in righteousness and the holiness of truth. Therefore, laying aside falsehood, speak truth to each other and to his neighbor, for you are members of one another. Be angry and do not sin. Do not let the sun go down on your anger, and do not give the devil an opportunity. He who steals must steal no longer, but rather he must labor, performing with his own hands what is good, so that he will have something to share with the one who has need. Let no unwholesome talk come out of your mouth, but only such a word that it is good for the edification of others according to the needs of the moment. That scripture right there at the end, he who steals must steal no longer, but must labor, instead performing with his hands what is good, so that he has something to share with those who are in need. I listened to that scripture while I was milking a goat, and I thought of the things I've done in my life with my hands. I have done good things in my life with my hands, but I have done the ultimate thievery with my hands. I have taken life with my hands. And I look at my hands, and some days I still see that. Some days that's still there. Some days it's still the mark of Cain I feel upon my flesh, because I was ensnared by the dragon to such a level that I saw life as a vain thing. I perceived life as something to be used and discarded because it was worthless. I saw my life as worthless at very critical moments of my early years, and it made me think other people's lives could be valued in the same way. But I have been changed out of that man, and I look at life and I value it. I treasure it. I'm trying to cultivate the life of my daughters right now. I'm trying to see them be raised up to fulfill a good work on this earth. I want them to be able to be mighty for his kingdom. I want them to be good fruit bearers. I have a different desire in my life. He's transforming me from who I was into who he is. And I listened to that verse and I thought of those moments of where I was thieving, and I thought of myself laboring with my hands here on a farm and literally making milk come out of an animal that I helped to feed and find ways to get to food so that it could produce for me milk, which I could feed to my family. I have been blessed to experience that lesson. I didn't learn that lesson when I studied the systems of evil all the time, when I studied the agents of evil all the time. I didn't learn those lessons until I went and sought a way to provide for my family, when I sought a way to try to nourish my family, when I started tending to the needs of others more than just the needs of myself. I was a thief all those years because I was not tended to, I was not nurtured, but at the same time, it's because I wanted to take back what was stolen from me. And so I thought I could have it by taking it from others. I couldn't take the life that I had been given and have it be restored. I couldn't take their life and make mine better. I saw that. Vengeance wasn't enough. Just because I blotted out a bad guy didn't fix the hole in my heart. But I realized how much transformation came when I bound myself instead to working in his kingdom, to seeking instead the deliverance of the souls of those individuals, for those people to be set free from the same snares, they just may look different, from the same curses that I was suffering. And I wanted to see them have freedom. I wanted to see them have courage. I wanted to see those same individuals lay down the bondages that had once been ruining them and see them be set free so that they could go bear forth fruit, so that they could take whatever wealth they once had and apply it to the kingdom of righteousness instead, and equipping the body to do good. I hope each of you will consider strongly how you yourself could be an agent of infiltration, how you could be someone who is destined and set here on this earth to infiltrate the very enemy's camp and go plunder his house. Do you understand? Some of you were made to do that today. Some of you were made to grab a hold of information, the hearts of people, a moment in time, a single conversation, a single meal shared with somebody else in love. You have an opportunity to witness, to share, to encourage, to edify, to lift up, to convict, to cut down, to destroy the despair that is in the hearts of people. You have an opportunity waiting for you to seize the very gates of death and resurrect. Teach someone the power of resurrection by the words from your mouth, the words of your testimony, the blood of the Lamb, and not loving your life even unto death. You can labor for that, and you can have courage. You can have boldness. These are the gifts that he will give us if we labor for him, if we put the sweat of our brow into reading and devoting ourselves to this word to let it change us and transform us from who we are into who he is. It will make us mighty. It will give us the opportunity to co-labor with creation again, to see life grow out of land that was once cursed with death. I'm a living witness of that. My family, my children are living witnesses of that. There are so many of you that have come along the way and nourished us, have fed us, have watered us, have cultivated us, have given us encouragement, have shared life with us. We needed you along the way. We needed teachers. We needed evangelists. I needed an evangelist to sit in my house with me one day. He was like a Bible thumper, an actual Bible thumper. He had his Bible with him all the time. He shared with me salty, convicting truths. He shared with my wife and I things we didn't want to hear. Like, how many times have you shared the gospel with your neighbors? And I was like, oh, but you don't understand. I live here all the time. What if that goes badly? That's going to be awkward. Yeah, it'd be different maybe if we were persecuted. That's what we tell ourselves in our head. If I was going to have to choose Jesus or death, I would choose Jesus. Yeah, but we don't when we actually are living in the days of evil and we choose not to witness to the people that are literally living around us. We are showing the fruit. We need to get pruning off of the fear of men that's in our soul. That's what we need. The Father will do that if you will ask him. He will do that. He will send in perfectly custom catered co-laborers to drop into your life at a moment and share with you something you needed at that exact second and prune you of that strangler vine They can tuck that thing out of your life and completely burn it from you. And a lot of time your pride has to go with it. A lot of time your insecurity has to go with it. A lot of time your humility is going to be the only thing. Well, your pride will go, and you will realize that it will make you so humble that you will realize the only thing you really need is him. The only thing you really need is his word, the life-sustaining spiritual waters that flow from his throne into our lives. It will empower us so that we can flourish inside an enemy-occupied territory, because you're all born in it. You're all living in it. You were raised in it. You've been cultivated in your entire society. Entire systems have been created to choke you out and to steal from you and kill from you and destroy from you everything that's good. And instead, you are supposed to be the standard that is raised up against it, the mighty one who is known by your deeds, but by the King you serve and his deeds working through you to establish the work of your hands. I hope and pray that he will establish the work of your hands, and that his every word would be fulfilled in your life, and that you would be mighty for the souls of the men and women that are out there waiting every single day for good harvesters to come along, for good fruit inspectors, for people that have wisdom, for people that have discernment between good and evil, to know how to judge what to say, when to say it, and how to be effective for the kingdom, and remove that veil of darkness that's been placed over their eyes so they can see clearly that truths of righteousness are waiting for them. I love you. I care about you. I want you to be safe out there. And by that, I mean live as dangerously as possible every single day of your life, because the days are evil, but you were born for such a time as this. I'll see you soon. Share this video if it behooves you, and consider looking at the links below, because we've got a whole lot of other stuff that's been going on out there. And I hope you would consider looking into it. It's a wild world out there, but be vigilant and faithful always, even unto death.